there from here, where the roads are winding, the stories are crazy, and maps don't mean a thing. So grab your boots and saddle up, we are chasing tales untamed. From haunted mines to mountain pines, no two roads are the same. The compass spins, the banjo grins, we ride where legends claim.
Welcome to the Can't Get There From Here podcast, a review show where we listen to, quote, based on true events, unquote, stories that are generated by artificial intelligence, which usually is the only intelligence the stories contain. I'm your host, Canny Bellingham, and I'm joined by Warren Reed, my bestest buddy and partner in crime when it comes to stealing Barbie heads from the Bon Marché. Hello, Warren. Good to be with you again.
Well, from the land of loose Barbie heads, it's good to be back.
I'm also joined by one of the best healers in World of Warcraft and someone who has no sense of direction when navigating raids, Nikki Maynard. How you doing, Nikki?
Hey kids, everything is just ducky on the frozen tundra up north. The descriptor of raids is not really necessary. There's one thing about me, I literally can get lost on a quote-unquote straight road.
Well, that's good to know. All right. Well, now before we begin, Nikki and Warren, I've noticed a common element found in these videos that I think we need to incorporate. Every one of these videos asks the listeners from the get-go to like and subscribe, of course. And they also ask the listener to leave a comment describing where and when they are listening to these videos. So, in order to pay homage to this tradition, I ask our listeners to leave a comment describing where and when they wish they are to listen to this video. It's none of my business where they actually are, and I'd like to think that they can come up with a better timeline than the one we are all currently suffering through. And so, Warren, what did we punish ourselves with this week? And I'm speaking about the video we reviewed, in case that was unclear.
Oh, well, I had other ideas, but okay. So, not to give any spoilers away, I'd like to say that the most amusing thing was to start off by reading the comments that are in that video. There's an awful lot of, is it pronounced Arkansans?
Yes, it is. Yes, Arkansans.
There's an awful lot of them proud to be represented, and an equal number of Arkansans who feel the need to ask if this story is true.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so sad.
Yeah.
That's why we do this, guys. That's why we do this. And Nikki, if someone held a gun to your head and demanded that you describe this video, what would you say?
Click, click, boom. Don't ask me who sings it. All I know is that it's all inside of my head. That is also how I describe this. I really did have hopes. I had high hopes. The words to describe this story: shallow, diluted, a chaotic flowing mess, and a belly flop into the mythos.
Okay, well, with those impressions, we will pause to consider our life choices and perhaps polish off a bottle of scotch before we return to review this meandering excuse for literature.
Hello, I'm Reverend Thomas Lawson, and these are my 3 assistants. We are here to let you know about our chapel, which has recently begun offering services where we attune ourselves with the resonant frequencies present in the spring waters in order to transform our basic physiological structures until they are more suitable to a water environment. In Jesus' name, of course.
Yes, in Jesus' name. I beg your pardon?
We want to invite you to attend our services next Sunday.
Yes. Please attend our services. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate the offer. Where is this new church?
Well, the chapel is precisely positioned above an underground channel, which leads to a cellar where we have built a cistern, where we perform deeper communion ceremonies for people who have experienced their first awakening.
The first awakening. Come again?
It's just a mile down the county road and across the bridge.
Across the bridge. Oh,
The chapel's design features an unusually high ceiling with exposed beams arranged in acoustically optimized patterns. The limestone under the chapel amplifies the subtle vibrations that common ears cannot detect. But when the proper frequencies are achieved, the boundaries between water and flesh become permeable.
now, hold on just a dadgum minute. Is this one of them newfangled modern religions? I don't hold with those no-how.
Oh, no, 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 of course not. Well, we adhere only to the oldest, most obscure religious practices available to man. If you attend our services, you will be utterly transformed and stuffed into a glass aquarium, able to extract oxygen from spring water.
Well, then, I'll see you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday.
Give me that
That
old-time religion. Give me that
old
old-time religion.
religion.
Give me
Give me
that
that
old-time
old-time
religion.
religion.
It's good enough for me. Right away, the narrator begins by trying to cover his ass. We are given a vague description of the settlement where this story takes place, but the settlement is not named. We know for a fact the frontier people love places, often names that describe exactly how miserable the people were who were unlucky enough to spend any time there. But, quote, the settlement of the Arkansas Hills was never meant to be remembered, unquote.
I can only imagine them bringing their wagons to a halt and saying, "Well, this is a place that deserves to be erased from all memory. Let's unpack."
Indeed, but I wasn't willing to let the AI off the hook that easily. So I attempted a Google search. At first, I thought, well, look at that. There is an Arkansas Hills settlement. But then I noticed the map said Colorado. So I kept digging. I found maps of the White River, which does exist, and follows a meandering course from northwest Arkansas up into Missouri and then back down into down to southeast Arkansas, where it joins with the Mississippi River. So the AI got that much right. Then when I doubled down on finding White River settlement, I found something far more horrifying than any fiction in these videos could come up with. Any guesses?
The settlement for the birth of the Jim Jones cult?
Township built exclusively for Mary Kay retirees.
Okay, interesting guesses, I guess. But actually, according to Google, quote, the Arkansas Hills settlement in Benton County likely refers to return to the land and intentional community, located in the Ozark Hills, unquote. If you are unfamiliar with this place, it's deliberately a private town in Arkansas, which is whites only.
Mm.
Notice how I am deliberately using the word is. Yes, this is something happening in the United States today. Is America great yet? I can't tell. Anyway, the narrator often hints this town was deliberately erased.
I'm thinking it sounds to me like rather than erasing it, they should have just used whiteout.
Okay, so erased, yes, but then it was uncovered by historian Dr. Margaret Holloway from the University of Arkansas while conducting a comprehensive study on frontier religious establishments. She found anomalies in the church records, but there was no such official records in the ecclesiastical registries. The absence deepened her fascination.
Of course it would. But this obsession with the Lawson Chapel was so consuming that it caused her to change her name. Did you guys notice this? Yeah, the narrator tells us, quote, for 6 months, this investigation would consume Dr. Spohr, period, Holloway's professional's focus until her abrupt retirement in 1963, citing personal health concerns, I should say, unquote. I'm thinking she was forced into retirement because she was totally neglecting her responsibilities at the University of Arkansas.
seems to be the case in these. And I guess that up to now, I'm not getting all the excitement and mystery about a church that perhaps existed and then didn't. I mean, in how many movies and TV shows was there a scene where the town church just burns to the ground? And I'm thinking it happened at least 3 times in Little House on the Prairie, right? And so for a town that was set up while intending to be eventually forgotten, as they said, I can't imagine that there'd have been a lot of push to rebuild a leveled church.
Now, this narrator is 1,000 times better than the last one. It almost sounds human. I was super impressed. That is, until it says, Dr. Pause, Holloway. And it made me so crazy. The first time it happened, I was listening while I was doing the laundry, and I had to stop and rewind it to make sure I didn't momentarily lose focus and just tune out. And no, the narration glitches 95% of the time. It says Dr. Holloway, and I was so distracted by the misuse of periods that I completely missed it changing to Dr. Spore.
It reminded me of my grandfather in his final years when he'd be saying something to me, telling me a story or something, and he'd get to the end and he'd stop and he'd organize his thoughts and he'd look at me and he'd say, Warren.
I need to remember that trick for future use. Anyway, the narrator explains, quote, the collection of materials she assembled, partial church ledgers, private correspondence, newspaper clippings, and local testimonies remained sealed in the university archives until 1968, when they were cataloged as part of a broader historical survey. The documents were subsequently microfilmed, and the originals reportedly lost during a campus renovation in 1969, unquote. How convenient, right? This is the AI's way of saying, you don't know her, she lives in Canada.
Oh my God. I had a girlfriend once who lived in Canada. Her name was Georgia. Georgia.
Hang on a second, Warren. I got to take a drink. Okay, go on. Her name was Georgia?
Glass. Yeah.
Georgia Glass?
Uh-huh. Georgia Glass. Yeah.
Are you sure you aren't just naming things that you happen to see?
What? No, her name was Georgia Glass. Yeah.
Sure, Jan.
Marsha.
But here's all this doctor's stuff she found from a town that was erased that no one thought about for almost a century until she decided to dig up the pieces and parts and fit them into an amazingly coherent timeline and a human puzzle.
Yeah, for a hot minute, I imagine that this could be a cool addition to the rotating detectives on the NBC mystery movie back in the 70s. Remember those? Columbo and McCloud and McMillan and wife. Dr. Holloway, finder of forgotten towns. But then I'm not sure how riveting the methodical unsealing of documents and meticulous spinning microfiche would be, no matter how great the groovy soundtrack might be.
Bow, chicka, bow, wow. Wacka, wacka. Moving on, we travel back in time to be introduced to Reverend Reverend Thomas Lawson, who arrived in the Arkansas hills in early 1871. Reverend Lawson purchased 5 acres of land from A. Joseph Hardin. I have always taken issue with using the indefinite article to describe a person. It sounds flippant and demeaning, like Joseph Hardins are a breed of human hardly worth talking about or possessing any distinction.
Like he's just one of many, nothing special here. Like, better to change it to the Joseph Hardin. Now we're talking.
Uh-huh. The deed to the property is described as quote, wooded land with natural spring suitable for community worship. What?
Interesting choice of words. In my very limited broad range understanding of the Christian belief system of any denomination, I don't generally believe that I've heard of them being interested in water for worship unless it was being turned into wine. This seems, shall we say, older than that.
And I, for one, would be particularly interested in the plots of land where the description describes it as unsuitable for community worship, and that I want to see.
Probably next to a porn store like Lion's Den or something like that. Anyway, as the actually I've seen churches next to porn shops.
There's no like a perfect location.
Yeah, now that I think about it, yeah. As for Reverend Lawson, the narrator tells us, quote, Lawson had come from Tennessee with references from established Baptist congregations, though curiously, attempts to verify these references decades later revealed no record of his previous pastoral work, unquote. Seems to me the denizens of this area dropped the ball by not following up on those references.
Lazy human resources department.
Okay, two things. One, I doubt anyone in the 1870s is going to travel the 300 or so 360 miles on horseback or rail to check on references in person. The mail system was more feasible as it was in place and working, and it narrowed the timeline of snail mail to a matter of 1 to 3 weeks, depending on how rural you were. But more importantly, I'd lay money that no one cared. I mean, really, you're a reverend? Okay, we can have one. Here, start over there. And even in present day, I am leery of the 19 churches that have popped up in 4 square miles, and I'm not even in the Bible Belt.
Much less the notch of the belt like here.
Right? Good point. According to the Arkansas Hills Gazette, a publication Google has never heard of, quote, reported on June 10th, 1871, quote, the new house of worship nears completion under Reverend Lawson's careful direction. The Reverend, a bachelor of scholarly disposition, has shown remarkable skill in both carpentry and spiritual guidance, unquote.
Well, Jesus was a carpenter first.
Yeah, and we all know how that turned out.
Yeah. Well, plus, let's not let us forget that this place is eventually erased from existence in memory, remember? So maybe the careful direction Reverend Lawson was providing missed a few nails?
Potentially. We are told the chapel, when finished, had unusually high ceilings where the exposed beams were arranged in, quote, acoustically optimized patterns, according to the Reverend Lawson. Okay, I looked this up. Ceiling beams can affect sounds by either increasing the surfaces on which sound may bounce, increasing echoes, or by being made of materials that absorb sound, thereby reducing the sound in areas with high ceilings. I'm not sure what the Reverend was going for, but high ceilings with hard wooden surfaces that reflect sound would have made this chapel echo a lot. Since we aren't given any description of the pattern that the beams were arranged in, it's impossible to understand what the noise would have sounded like. I'm going to give it a pass though, but I smell bullshit.
Well, unless his goal was to be able to hear what the newly married couple sitting in the back row was whispering to one another the whole time.
That's everybody's goal.
Yeah. And especially in a church.
Yep.
Okay, so the church that I grew up in when I was a little kid was ginormous. It was absolutely stunning. The rectory was built in true historical fashion, and it was amazing. I still remember the stained glass windows. The pastor never used a mic. He never had to. But I can also tell you, the minute that any other sound was introduced, it was a cacophony of noise. Like you could hear the heeled shoes, men and women's, click on the marble, shuffling of the papers, and the scrape of the nail boards, and multiple times during services. And I grew up in a Lutheran church, so I've been told it's not as bad as Catholic service. But in short, the service was up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, communion, benediction, and done. So.
Yeah.
During that time, if a child cried, it was all over. There was no You don't even bother trying to hear until the kid was outside the giant oak doors. I do remember the hymns being absolutely beautiful, though. As long as there was no other outside noise, it was stunning.
It sounds like it had almost as much calisthenics involved as the Holy Roller churches I was raised in.
And there's always a baby to cry.
Yeah, always.
Yes.
I'd be willing to bet you $100 against a dozen donuts that such an effect was done on purpose, though. When you were told that God was watching you in such a place, you absolutely had to believe it. A sneeze would have had people ducking and covering.
Yeah, there are no secrets in the house of God.
At least none that will be reported to the authorities. But I found the arrangement of the pews in a semicircular pattern to be kind of interesting.
Hmm.
You know, that would have been way ahead of their time. In some mega churches today, the pulpit is literally in the center of an arena and allows the congregation a 360-degree view of the pastor, sort of like a Stonehenge style of worship, I guess. However, having a preacher at the center of that worship seems problematic to me.
You know, I'm imagining him on like a giant lazy Susan spinning however. You know, actually, that'd be pretty fabulous.
That would be.
Go there.
Oh, on the property of the chapel was a limestone spring from which Timber Creek flowed and was known for its unusual clarity and consistent temperature throughout the seasons. From the narrator's tone, we are expected to believe this is somehow suspect. However, another Google search confirms that because springs usually come from deep natural aquifers, the water is largely unaffected by ambient temperatures above ground and are popular gathering spots for wildlife in colder seasons.
Know what that temperature is? Cold. Not comfortable. And as you said, deep natural aquifers keep the temperature consistent. They don't freeze solid because the water is moving, but it's cold water. Much like I'm not going to walk on a river up here, no matter how freaking cold this ice age is. I'm no. I actually have a slow-moving spring just outside my pasture that fills the pond that goes into my pasture. The water is always cold, and even in the dead of the winter, if I go out there, the ground is soft where it trickles from where the spring is down into my pond.
Wow.
It's always mushy there.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Moving forward in time again, we hear that Dr. Holloway interviewed Sarah Millbrook, who at age 96 was maybe the last person living who recalled what happened at the Lawson Chapel. She had attended the church for around 10 months. At first, she said it was like any Baptist meeting, songs and scripture. But then there were new songs introduced. How dare they? Different prayers, chanting of phrases while the congregates were arranged in patterns atop chalk marks that the reverend had drawn. You know, the usual herd conditioning to submit to someone with unearned authority.
Yeah, you know, I don't care where I am, that the second the chalk comes out, I am out of there. I mean, what starts as an innocent round of hopscotch can quickly turn into the outline of a broken body.
So, wait, the narrator says that by Christmas these changes have been made, and now they're standing on marks and chanting things that they don't know the meanings of. So it was 6 months if they finished in June, and then they were chanting and standing on symbols by Christmas. That's some fast work. And scary fact, I looked up how long it takes to indoctrinate a person, and according to an article from both the University of Texas and another one from Psychology Today, because I'm a learned bitch, this is not uncommon. Cult-like enthusiasm can occur at any time from weeks to months, and most loyalists are people that would be considered at risk in modern terms. So what I mean, like marginalized people, poor people, isolated people. So if you need something to believe in, there's always someone there to sell it to you.
Yeah. Which is the exact format used by multi-level marketing schemes. In fact, religion very often is incorporated in MLMs, including chanting, singing, and directing participants to stand, sit, and do other physical activities, as well as invoking God or Jesus during the sales pitch. Human nature demands conformity. It's why we stand in line at the grocery store instead of just pushing our way all the way to the front of the queue. Humans are more receptive to wild claims when there's an entire room full of people who are agreeing with that claim.
Mhm.
Yeah, ask me why I have a $2,000 rainbow vacuum cleaner sitting in my in my living room. Um, they got me, and it was a family member that did it, and she is naughty. And
Yeah.
it was all in the name for more attachments for her if I agreed to a demonstration.
Uh-huh.
And I'm proud to say that it did end with me. I have no friends and I had no family that I would con into doing another demonstration. So take that, Rainbow. Take my $2,000 and be gone.
Well, wait, was there at least a set of steak knives thrown in as a bonus? I seem to remember something like that.
No. For the steak knives, you had to first ascend to a higher tier of the pyramid. Anyway, to continue, I speak from personal experience, Okay. To continue with the video, Sarah, the 96-year-old former Lawson chapel congregant, explains, quote, some nights when the moon was right, you could hear music coming from the chapel, though no regular service was scheduled, unquote. I was unaware that the position of the moon could affect sound waves, but according to Google, the only time the moon could potentially affect the sound on Earth is during a lunar eclipse. Apparently, this location in Arkansas frequently experienced lunar eclipses that don't happen anywhere else on the continent.
Well, if this happens when the moon is right, I want to know what happened when the moon was wrong.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think instead of being literal, the narrator is alluding to some pagan celestial ritual. Lunar phases are very important in many pagan religions, and boy, those Baptists should be pissed.
Yeah, but I think you're giving this narrator too much credit. I don't think the narrator thinks at all. Anyway, then Mrs. Langley, another church congregant, quote, collapsed during service, shaking and speaking words none could understand, unquote. And Sarah's father forbade Sarah from attending the church after that. Oh, and it continues. I wish my father had had the same. Actually, I got to do that again. Edit. Then Mrs. Langley, another church congregant, quote, collapsed during service, shaking and speaking words that none could understand. And Sarah's father forbade Sarah from attending the church after that. I wish my father had had the same reaction when I was too young to understand why people were dropping like flies around me during a holy roller service just because the preacher had put some oil on their foreheads. It took me a few years to realize that religious experience manifested as a competitive sport.
Oh, and not to be nitpicky, but if she's uttering sounds that no one can understand, can they really be called words?
Oh, I promise you, Warren. After hearing glossolalia, also known as prayer language or speaking in tongues, too many times as a kid, those folks will tell you with a straight face that Alek Shemazu Kabbalah Shmaz Il Gorlaria are words. Ancient words. Yeah, ancient words from a language that used to exist but has now been forgotten. And they will be telling you the truth as they see it. It's a case of we're all adults who mutually agree not to call each other out on their bullshit.
Oh, dear, I'm so sorry you have that memory, but I'm glad you survived it.
Who says I did?
I would like to. I'm torn because I would kind of like to see what one of those was like. The only time I've seen it was like on X-Files.
Mhm.
But I'm also scared.
There's videos, I promise you. After the record, we'll send you a bunch of videos of all of this. It is. There's one that's put to like rap music. It's just absolutely hysterical.
Wow.
Anyway, back to this. Something I found annoying about this story is that you are never sure where you are in the telling of this narrative. The narrator tells us that Dr. Holloway in 1962 detected something sinister about Reverend Lawson, even in the most positive descriptions of the man. Okay, how could she detect this? What were the clues? We are not given any answers to these questions, of course. She just senses it, and we, the listeners, are just supposed to let it go. She talks as if she was in the room with Reverend Lawson at some point.
Well, like that social worker instincts from the last video, remember?
Yep.
Yeah. And I get that some writers skip from past to present or what the narrator wants to present as present. But this doesn't flow well. There is no justifiable reason that the story should jump back and forth as it does. It seems like the snippets of Dr. Holloway are just stuck in the storyline to say, yeah, there was a doctor that was into this. For real, not imaginary at all.
Yep, a legit doctor too. Just don't Google it. In a letter from a visiting minister in 1871, the sermons were described to veer away from traditional Baptist canon. Reverend Lawson described vessels of divine purpose and flesh as a sacred instrument. And my response was, so? I was indoctrinated in multi-denominational religion, all originated from some flavor of Christianity. And such phrases were familiar to me. When I questioned about these phrases, Reverend Lawson justifies himself by claiming personal revelation and ancient recovered wisdom. Lawson's personal library was scrutinized by the visiting minister, who didn't recognize many of the languages on offer, no Greek or Hebrew. And, quote, when I inquired about them, the visiting minister explained, he, Lawson, spoke of older tongues that shaped the waters of creation and suggested that the conventional Bible translations capture merely the surface ripples of the deeper undercurrents, unquote.
That's deep.
As still waters often run.
Just check any municipal sewage system for reference. Okay, dear listener, let's briefly review. I don't want you folks to miss the subtle references to water and all that entails. We have a spring that just happened to be located on the chapel's property, a moon that frequently hides the sun and affects sound on Earth. I didn't mention that the baptismal was located in the basement of the chapel, but it's there too. And now we have humans described as vessels, and scripture merely the surface ripples of deeper currents. Okay, got that? The story is water-based, so let's move on.
The visiting minister inquired about the musical instrument in Reverend Lawson's study. We're told that it is something like an organ with tubes leading to vessels of water. Reverend Lawson merely smiled and said that it was for calling those who dwelled deeper in deeper harmonies. Something's fishy here, and we better move into the depths.
Well, I have to say that throughout this, when I keep hearing about all this water down beneath this structure, I'm thinking, they don't have a dehumidifier, and that place is going to be covered in mold in no time. So that, as a homeowner, that bothered me. And then there's the Reverend's, quote, personal journal recovered partially from a trunk in the abandoned parsonage,
Yes.
unquote. And so I'm thinking, how does one recover something partially? Did it fall to pieces and half the pages flew away? I'm confused.
I think it was more like someone reached into the wreckage of the abandoned and most likely nearly destroyed parsonage, grabbed the ledger, shrugged, and decided it wasn't worth it.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, the inquiry into Reverend Lawson's theology was not challenged by the visiting minister, nor did the letter sent to Baptist leadership in Little Rock lead to any type of reprimand or deeper inquiry. And I must admit that this tracks. In my experience, most smaller congregations are led by preachers who pretty much wing it. When they aren't overtly plagiarizing sermons from other preachers, that is, churches like to believe that they follow a strict adherence to canon and tradition, but at least in practice, will cater their sermons to address concerns within the congregation. And whether the scripture refers to the exact concern is not relevant to the subject of making Sister Mary stop wearing that indecent dress to church on Sundays.
I do know that social justice is steep in the church.
Mhm.
You either toe the line in order to be accepted fully, or you're in trouble.
Mhm.
From what I have seen personally, the cliques in the church are brutal. I remember my nanny having issues with the women's circle at church. Her being devout, or an elder, or steward, I don't remember what women were called there, but she was
Yeah.
somebody.
Mhm.
It didn't stop her from being chastised for some grievance within the clique. I was too young to know what that was about. My guess now is that she didn't always go with the flow,
Mhm.
and
Well, yeah,
that was rifty.
Yeah.
well, and everybody wants to be the scorekeeper for who may or may not make it past St. Peter. And then St. Peter's the guy that stands at the pearly gates, right? So
Mhm.
he's like the doorman who decides who can and can't sashay into the hottest disco in town. You're in. No, you need to go back, and then back.
Yeah. We learned that in addition to Sunday meetings, Wednesday night prayer services, and Ladies' Aid Society, the church began to segregate among the congregants those who totally were buying into the Reverend's ideology and those who remained skeptical. If this were a modern church, I'd call bullshit on this. Churchgoers have an entire buffet of churches from which to sample in nearly every community across the country. From my house in Missouri, there are several hundred churches scattered around within a 10-mile radius. But back then, I give those folks a pass. Basically, the choices of where to worship were the one church in the community or becoming a pariah in the community. However, from everything I've heard about the Baptist faith, they don't tolerate deviation from the core message. And a guy who suddenly introduced a water derived religion would most likely have been told to move along. Or alternatively, someone might have bothered to check his references. Remember those? The stuff that he used to prove his credibility?
I mean, by now someone has got to be questioning this insanity, right?
Right.
Well, but if we're going back to the notion of cults and the cases in which seemingly normal congregations suddenly morph into like really cray-cray stuff, it tends to happen over time. Like gain trust, introduce doubt, create interpersonal conflict, etc. And I'm getting the sense that the folks here were just like, well, that's different, but if you say so,
Okay.
Exactly.
I'm on board.
Anyway, from minute 9 to about minute 10:41, we are given further detail into the construction of the chapel and its effect on the resonances, the stonework around the spring water, so that the water would flow directly under the pulpit. And the narrator tells us, quote, "When the proper frequencies are achieved, the boundaries between water and flesh become permeable," as if this is something normal and not strange at all.
You know, frequencies can be a bitch. Ask any sci-fi show genre. Hell, even South Park made the mention of the brown note. Um, the real question is, who in their right mind would want the boundaries between water and flesh permeable? The science nerd in me is screaming, "Danger! Danger, Will Robinson! Water intoxication is real." And you will short circuit yourself at a cellular level. Too much water is bad.
Yes.
I'm remembering that story about the radio contest and that woman who drank all that water while holding her rapidly expanding bladder. It did not
Exactly.
It
You
did not
die.
turn out good for her, no.
Oh, okay. Because nothing really exciting ever actually happens during this story, I'm going to go ahead and spoil the main premise. The church, with its magical spring waters, are turning people into merfolk. We are coaxed into this conclusion in the most boring manner possible. We, the listener, are clobbered about the head with acoustics and vibrations and resonance so much that it's because of a head injury that we are able to have any buy-in at all with the story.
Suddenly, I understand clearly the purpose of the opening notes in that Little Mermaid song. Ah,
And
Yeah.
what and what really irritates me is we are never given a reason why this reverend would want to turn people into merfolk. He just does. And when we hear from his diary, we are led to believe that there is some higher scientific purpose in this endeavor, but there isn't. He remains in the "this is so cool" camp throughout the narration.
I, Cue Victor Frankenstein.
or Harold von Braunhout. Who is he, you ask? Well, he's none other than the creator of sea monkeys. In 1962, he collaborated with marine biologist Anthony D'Agostino to develop a nutrient mix for the hybrid brine shrimp that allowed them to hatch into tap water.
Hmm.
Comic book aficionados and their families will remember this strange curiosity quite well.
I certainly do. I remember that when they hatched, they looked nothing at all like the illustrations in the comic book.
No,
Not a single one of them held a trident.
no.
Back to the narration, though, by January 1872, we are told the congregation held about 70 people and had begun to attract attention from outlying areas, in spite of growing separation within the congregation, as described in the diary entry, dated January 18th, 1872. On one side of the congregation were folks who totally embraced the Reverend's new teaching, and the other side maintained secret reservations. Sorry. The folks in the former group would stay after the services and what Lawson referred to as deeper communions. Those
Mm.
folks would later reemerge from the chapel, quote, looking strangely affected, eyes dilated, movements languid, speaking in hushed tones about the singing beneath, unquote.
And once again, the old point of view problem. So, in order for a narrative to have this level of detail, someone would have to have witnessed it and later report it. So, we're expected to believe that Elizabeth, the writer of the diary in question, waited until the congregants had filed out of the chapel after the quote deeper communion, took the time to observe their behavior and perhaps even interview them in order to get such detail. I mean, granted, decent entertainment was few and far between in those days, but I think that
True.
watching people exit a church is not much more exciting than watching paint dry.
And not only that, but don't these people have to work? I mean, from my
Mhm.
understanding, farming in the 1870s was not a 9 to 5 job. I find
Uh,
it hard to believe that a third or more of the town, particularly whole families, just upped and stopped doing chores.
right?
My my own hobby farm is not a 9 to 5 job. I don't live out there, but I sure as shit go out there quite a bit, and I don't use it to survive. And that's not to mention, like the mundane tasks such as mending broken shit, cooking, cleaning, and what about school? What about the little kids?
Cool.
Yeah,
I've mentioned while I was on the prairie. I know they had a school in town.
right? We hear observations by the local physician who was himself a congregate of Lawson Chapel. Dr. James Whitfield, who wrote to a medical colleague in Fayetteville. I am perplexed, he says, by symptoms presenting in several patients from the congregation at Lawson Chapel. They report identical disturbances, persistent ringing in the ears, especially at night, accompanied by vivid dreams. They are are reluctant to describe. More troubling is their shared conviction that these experiences are not afflictions to be treated, but rather awakenings to be embraced. An entire family spent nearly all of their waking hours at the chapel. Changes in the appearance of the family include significant weight loss and unusual skin pallor and unnatural fluidity and movement, as if their joints have been somehow altered. Hmm.
You know,
Mm.
this reminds me of the movie The Faculty, where the kids are systematically changed one by one, and like there are only 4 of them that had a problem with it. And seriously, if weird shit is happening, I'm getting out of Dodge. I'm not waiting. I'd much rather be ostracized than have Frankenscience happen to my body.
And those 4 kids in the faculty, they just like keep going to school when this is going on. Like, is there ever, if there's ever a decent reason to skip class, right? But anyway, yeah. So joint alteration would be enough to send me running for the hills, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Mhm. Another concerning symptom was their synchronized speech and how they completed one another's sentences or spoke in unison without apparent coordination. When questioned, they smiled in identical fashion and said only the waters had aligned them. The physician feared some kind of mass delusion had taken hold, you think? Possibly exacerbated by contamination from the spring water they consumed during chapel rituals. By March, nearly a third of the congregation showed these symptoms. The few community records show increased activity at the chapel, with some members attending daily prayer sessions and sometimes continued well into the night. I have to wonder who was doing the recording here. Also, the physician is attending the church. If he thinks it's mass delusion, why would he continue to attend?
We're on the same page, so are we attuned?
We hear details about a notebook found after the chapel had been destroyed naturally that contained drawings of the human inner ear and contained cryptic descriptions of primary resonance chambers and other intentionally oblique jargon about changes within the inner ear. There is a cross section of the skull with the auditory canals highlighted and modified. The notebook explains after sufficient exposure to the frequencies, the physical restructuring begins naturally.
Again, so we're left to guess if this is the intended result or if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, who knows? And the whole notebook thing leads me to believe that the Reverend was just like doing stuff because why not? But the notebook continues with, quote, the waters reshape their vessels from within, opening channels between worlds that mundane flesh normally blocks, end quote. And by the way, if you're counting on the cryptic statement to be explained, just
You know, as Isaac Asimov said, the most exciting phrase to hear in science, the one that heralds the most discoveries, is not Eureka, but that's funny. Methinks the good Reverend Lawson is a hobby scientist.
Mhm. Then we start hearing about people disappearing.
Good lord.
Oh, yes. So the Reverend tells everyone that these disappearances are merely congregants who have been suddenly inspired to spread the word of Lawson Chapel elsewhere. Nothing to worry about here, folks. Just letters are provided to family members explaining away the absence. And even though the handwriting is not that of the person who has apparently left on this mission, and when the Reverend is actually confronted with this curiosity, he just smiles and says, the waters did it. You know, blame it on nature.
This is going to be my next defense when I do something stupid. It happens. And also, the people just up and left all of their stuff behind, and that was not uncommon. I mean, I'm not sure that that would be any normal in any way, shape, or form in any religion. You pack, you plan, you have
Right.
pamphlets.
Oh, we are told of transparent fingers, webbed fingers, and something to do with changes to the neck. of the afflicted. And finally, too late, the doctor decides he can no longer put aside his professional training by explaining the events with the natural effects of religious fervor. I'd like to
Yeah,
know
now
what
you're
medical school this guy went to. I'm
so.
thinking of Liberty University, but anyway. The doctor found written descriptions of anatomical change in the diary of Thomas Garner. The final entry of Garner's diary says, quote, "The water no longer feels wet to me. It feels like home. I must bring these findings to the county authorities, though I fear they will think me mad," unquote.
Okay, I feel another song coming on. Maybe from Buffalo Springfield. There's something happening here.
Mhm.
This is why I get nothing done. There are way too many associations going on to keep my little brain going in this continuous, ludicrous wet slide to hell. Heaven, yeah.
What it is ain't exactly clear.
See, you know where I'm going.
Yes.
Okay, onward. So the good doctor finds out too late that he's going to get turned into some kind of harmonizing fish of sorts, and he does, however, keep in the good graces of the suspicious reverend, so he can collect a sample of water and take some notes. His water analysis shows high mineral content, and for that I'm shocked that a natural ground spring in limestone has minerals. Duh.
Right?
Compounds he cannot identify, and organic material that is not known, algae or bacteria. Well, good doctor, you are not an ecologist, nor aquatic biologist, nor do I believe for one red second that you have any qualifications as a backwoods doctor to disseminate what is going on. Good try, old chap. Now get someone else involved.
Yes. Preferably someone either qualified in something besides random speculation or someone who actually thinks what's happening is bad and shouldn't continue. During the summer of 1872, the attendance of the church services declined. Imagine that.
Without time, damn it. I mean, if I went to a church that included congregants who suddenly grew webbed fingers before then disappearing, I think I'd think twice before dropping a single dime into that collection plate.
For reference, I come from a very small place. So my graduating class had 57 students that walked across the stage. I can name every one of those kids. Actually, I can, and 95% of their siblings, but I could probably name everybody from 9th to 12th grade, honestly.
Wow.
Had 3 gone missing, I'd have known it. Had
Yeah.
an entire family gone missing, I'd have definitely known it. And if they started sprouting webbed fingers and gaunt complexion and see-through skin, I think I'd know. Check, please. I'm out.
Right? I mean, when an entire family suddenly up and disappeared, and he was questioned about these folks, quote, Reverend Lawson reportedly stated only that the family had achieved perfect resonance and would speak through the waters when the time was proper. So, unsurprisingly, several families then quietly relocated from the region around the chapel. I mean, who could blame them, right?
Right.
Finally.
Well, yeah.
Don't mind me. I'm just going to walk this direction with all my stuff.
Well, the community wasn't satisfied with this vague non-explanation, so they took matters into their own hands and started a petition.
Oh, rumph.
Organized by the original land seller. You remember him, A. Jordan Harden? They collected signatures of 7 other prominent community members and submitted it to the regional Baptist authorities. And I'm quite sure that the resolution of this complaint would be akin to the many complaints of sexual impropriety submitted to the Southern Baptist Convention today. Just relocate the preacher and pay off the victims in exchange for their continued silence. Don't worry
File
about
it in the circular file next to the desk.
it. Yep.
150 plus years later, and that is still how it's handled most often.
In teaching and education, we used to call it the dance of the lemons to move teachers from one place to another.
Oh my God.
Not nice.
Oh, never knew that, Warren. Oh. Okay. To continue, the petition discovered in 1962 by Dr. Holloway in his denominational archives cited concerns about unorthodox practices, unexplained absences, and alterations to the chapel structure inconsistent with approved design. Oh, the horror.
See, now I'm getting L. Ron Hubbard vibes, and maybe even a little LDS. Both spend billions on places of worship.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the structural inconsistencies are explained by Dr. Whitfield's notes, found later in his personal possessions after his death. They described how the pulpit had been removed and replaced by a circular hole in the floor with a wooden covering set in the hole while it wasn't in use. The hole led to the cellar beneath. The narrator wants the listener to believe that Whitfield achieved these notes with much stealth and intrigue. But basically it boils down to Whitfield staying on the Reverend's good side and just waiting until the Reverend wasn't in the chapel.
Mm.
Well, the cat's away, the mice will play. Speaking of which, while their dear Reverend was called away, did the transformations just halt? Did they just go back to their homes and pick up their scythes and hay and feed the long dead cows and reap, the fallow fields? What did they do?
Right?
Well, I'm thinking the entrance to the cellar just gives new meaning to the hymn "Holy, Holy, Holy."
Yes. We get more description of the cellar, and as is common with the videos of this kind, the walls of the cellar are decorated with carvings of stylized human forms and wave patterns. The cellar has been expanded and extensively modified. Quote, the natural spring had been channeled into a circular basin approximately 12 feet in diameter and of unknown depth, unquote.
So, unknown depth. Did anyone try to find out how deep it was by tying a rock onto a rope or feeding into the water, or did they just stare at it and just shrug their shoulders?
Well, there were also alcoves carved into the rock walls around the chamber with sleeping pallets in each of them, and described to have, quote, stains and odors suggest purposes beyond rest, unquote. So, cum, right? The narrator is saying the bed pallets smelled like cum. Did you guys arrive at that conclusion, or just me?
like the honeymoon suite at the Skyline Motel off Highway 99 in North Seattle, maybe?
Okay, again, stop the world. I want off. I want to get off.
Good thing they didn't have those blue light back then. They're kind of way down in that cellar.
Right? Oh my God, everything is glowing in here.
This is so bad.
Streamers on the ceiling.
It's like a Jackson Pollock painting down here.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, to continue, we of course are told about glass jars, which contain specimens arranged along the eastern wall of the cellar. You can't have creepy religion/science experiments without the appearance of glass jars somewhere in the story. That's just physics. The jars were labeled with the names corresponding to the missing congregation members. Imagine that. And contained what Whitfield believed were human tissue samples.
So in my mind, there's an unexplained light source that casts the glow on each jar, too, because that's always in the movies.
Hopefully it was the blue light we were discussing a moment ago. This video, however, takes a unique turn of providing an extensive collection of anatomical texts in languages Whitfield cannot identify. Why would anyone need more than one of these? The human body is complex, sure, but do you really need to have more than one volume to explain all of the different systems and structures? Is the story suggesting that in some languages the human body is built differently?
And thus, each volume is the size and thickness of a Watchtower brochure, maybe.
Potentially.
Yes.
Now, you can't have mysticism without creepy books that you don't understand. Heavens to Betsy, they could have been written in like French or Gaelic.
Oh, God forbid.
Well, then Whitfield discovers a hidden room in the cellar behind one of the bookcases because, of course, there needs to be a hidden place within a hidden place.
Of
And
course.
in this hidden place, he discovers glass tanks large enough to hold an entire human and filled with spring water. And first, I want to know where in the hell you get a glass tank that size way out in the middle of nowhere back then.
Right. Oh, I confess, Warren, it didn't occur to me to even question the origin of such tanks. I think these videos are slowly reshaping my worldview on how shit works. But moving on, we are given a detailed description of what Whitfield witnessed in that hidden room. 3 of the tanks were occupied by human forms, which had transformed to have elongated limbs, webbed fingers, and translucent skin, revealing altered internal organs helpfully. Whitfield approached one of the tanks and recognized the occupant, who opened her eyes and pressed a hand against the glass. Whitfield explains that there are several tubes connecting to the tanks and that occupants no longer need air, but extracted oxygen directly from the water. Whitfield then explains in his notes that he hears a sound from above the cellar and says he'll contact the county sheriff tomorrow. Why would he write that instead of either trying to find a place to hide or escape hole? Please help me understand this, guys.
It's kind of like one of those things that when we were kids, you'd write on a note for your eyes only because we were super important when we were kids.
Oh, yeah.
In retrospect, it's so fortunate that he wrote everything down in a journal that somehow didn't get taken and wasn't destroyed. The man had forethought. He wrote it all down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you guessed it. Nothing was reported to the sheriff. A fire broke out in Whitfield's private offices. I wonder how that happened. And the doctor perished. Other members of the community thought it was suspicious since Thomas Garner's brother, who was seen near the office just before the fire broke out. But, of course, the constable, who concluded that the fire had been an accident, had also been attending services at the chapel since May. I sense conspiracy here.
Conflict of interest. So in August of 1872, the regional Baptist authorities finally responded to the petition. And Reverend Lawson is confronted and exiled from the community, cloaked in a blanket of shame. Just kidding. Actually, Reverend Caleb Morrison just shows up and questions Lawson and basically says, meh, nothing to see here. And while that was the official conclusion given to the community, Morrison sends a private missive exclusively to his superior bishop, Edwin Hargrove, in an envelope marked confidential for your eyes only.
Like I knew what they were going to say. I'm a mystic. My precognition skills are amazing.
I was thinking that when I read your notes earlier, Nikki. Anyway, this note presented a different reaction to what was happening at Lawson Chapel. Quote, I write separately from my official report as what I witnessed at Lawson Chapel extends beyond what I can commit to our official record without risking both credibility and unnecessary alarm, unquote. Morrison described how the chapel was unrecognizable as a Baptist house of worship. He reveals that he used to know Lawson back in Tennessee, but Lawson had physically changed with peculiar movements and speech patterns. Lawson's theological positions represented severe heresy bordering on pagan water worship, mixed with pseudoscientific theories about human anatomy serving as resonant vessels for ancient harmonies. Morrison continues to detail many very disturbing things about the chapel, its cellar, and its effects. He later explained on himself while staying in the vicinity of the chapel. But after all of this, he tells the superior that the church should just forget about the remote community and abandon any efforts to either reform or heal the congregants because he feared retaliation from them. What a guy.
He turned the other cheek, literally. So much so that even his peripheral vision is blocked. It's kind of like when my dog buries her head under a blanket. She truly believes she's hiding from me. Never mind the 70-pound ass sticking up with the tail thumping like it's keeping time.
Well, and again, there's no effort given to involving law enforcement, which tends to be the theme in these stories. Either the law can't be bothered to do anything, or they aren't even informed in the first place. And in this case, the bishop is more concerned with avoiding scandal than he is with the well-being of the congregants of this small community who have essentially just put their faith in him. So, yeah, this totally tracks.
Yeah, sadly. A common story element in videos of this type is the use of storms. Storms which either cover up or reveal important story elements, depending on the needs of the narrative, of course. This storm caused a flash flood, which caused several of the merfolk to escape along the flooding river. Reverend Lawson mysteriously disappears at this time, and the story is continued in a diary conveniently discovered in Joseph Hardin's personal belongings years later.
Okay, convenient to say the least. And here's the part that I have an issue with, among many, and it may seem moot when we're already talking about being fantastical merfolk. Okay, fine. But aren't there supposed to be points steeped in realism to make a story seem balanced? The narrator spins this part of the story. Quote,
Nikki, there was a doctor in this story. A doctor, okay? He was a doctor.
that is the realism right there.
Yes. Thank you.
So, quote, the most coherent narrative comes from Samuel Greer, who lived approximately 1 mile downstream from the chapel. In a statement given to a local newspaper that never existed in 1875, and subsequently preserved in Dr. Holloway's research materials, end quote. Note that it was written in a preserved document. Again, eye roll. Quote, continuing, Greer described witnessing an unusual phenomenon during the height of the storm. I was securing my livestock when I noticed the creek water had turned peculiar, darker than mere storm turbidity would explain, with an oily sheen that caught what little light remained. End quote. Now, and this is why I have a problem, the storm was at night. Yes. You can't tell me you see the change in watercolor at night during the storm. When he goes on about the sound and seeing merfolk continuing during lightning flashes, well, that's fantasy writing and it has its place, and that's fine. But don't you tell me that you can see water become darker and that it has an oily sheen in the dead of night in a storm when you're putting your freaking cows away. Okay, that's a little too far, sir. Just a little too far.
You were good all the way up until the cows part. The cow that just ruined the whole thing for you.
And what does water look like at night? It looks black, like deep abyss black. It's the little things that annoy me. The little parts that make a story whole and fun. And when you completely unbalance the fantasy and the realism structure with silly, stupid inconsistencies to extend detail, it's just dumb.
Yeah,
I agree.
Just like the lack of involvement of the law, and another annoying trope in these stories is the clear inventory of visual details while in the dead of night, and it's usually in the midst of like a violent storm.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. Pardon me. Here I need to whine and gripe about diaries in general, if you guys will allow me. I have never managed to keep a diary beyond the first month, sometimes less. But in these stories, diaries are meticulous and are often supplemented with other notes. I don't know how often I've heard characters in these stories say how important it was to try and forget past horrors and bury whatever histories that might be offensive or intolerable. However, personal diaries are constantly showing up in odd places to utterly destroy all efforts to hide dark histories. I can believe one diary being discovered that might contain some mysterious reference to a single horrific event. But in these stories, entire libraries are available in diary form with dozens of people who all contribute to paper, extreme detail, and obvious plot points. I get it that these stories are meant to be vague and only loosely based on actual events, but that purpose is undermined by diaries containing minute details and description. Okay, end of rant. But by minute 38 of this video, the chapel is completely destroyed. The reverend is missing. All of the incriminating evidence of the crimes it has also has edit. By minute 38, this video, the chapel is completely destroyed, the reverend is missing, and all of the incriminating evidence of the crimes which happened there are burned on top of the rubble. Joseph Harden wrote in his diary, quote, "Afterward, we agreed never to speak of what we had seen. Some horrors are best buried and forgotten." Except he wrote this down in his diary. Why? So he could read about it later? Doesn't that defeat the goal of burying and forgetting? Oh,
And I'm waiting for the inscription that says, "If you are reading this now, don't tell anyone, Kay."
And isn't this the guy that created the petition to help and have Lawson investigated? And
don't
he
remember,
started
maybe.
it, and now he changed his mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess if everyone is magically affected by just seeing this material strewn about and being in the area, you'd likely want to destroy it and not let people near. But, is this supposed to be the mysticism part? Is this like the Jumanji board that floats down the river and you can hear its drums?
Right. Yes. Oh. So, what's left to tell in the remaining 27 minutes? Well, dear listener, if you thought the story should end here, I need to disappoint you.
Oh.
Oh, yes. The story continues, mostly with rehashing what we've already been told, but with one curious element. Joseph later wrote in his diary, quote, "The men's efforts may have been insufficient."
Of course they were insufficient. You keep writing this shit down, you idiot.
Right? The narrator describes an incident where the elongated footprints with webbed toes were found in the dirt walking from the river to William Reed's house, a barn back then, sorry. Reed also reported hearing singing in as well.
Damn varmints.
Right. The listener is subjected to multiple first-hand accounts of encounters with creatures with webbed fingers, echoing voices, and introducing themselves with names that matched the missing people from Lawson Chapel. We hear again how the auditory structures of these creatures seemed altered, though not through injury or congenital defects. And these words are scrambled and repeated for at least the next 15 minutes. By this time, I'm scrolling through the transcription of the video, desperately searching for anything interesting to happen. I believe my search to be futile, though.
Well, and meanwhile, I'm finding myself forcing additional material into the story. And I know they allude to this, but I want it more graphic. Like, what if the tubes and chambers and such were a giant model of the inner ear, and
that'd
there's
be cool.
some scientific correlation to that, and the creatures like more explicit? Wouldn't that just be a lot more interesting?
It would indeed.
See, now you would have a story. And This story pretty much continues on with the mer people visiting the normies and trying to
Muggles.
continue to convert. I agree. It's just rehashing for length and let the listener know that this continues even though the town is gone and the people are migrating away. They, the merfolk, continue on and camp on. And a camp was found on the riverside in 1874. Now, if they're changed, why the hell did they leave camps on land? They should be
Yes.
fishes. I mean, really. Among this and other topics being glossed over, such as the woman running out of a hospital and exactly how it was documented that these people can distort and dislocate their joints in order to get out of confined spaces.
Mm.
But they did document in excruciating detail the auditory anomalies and structures. Because this, I'm sure, is of a utmost importance to a hospital taking in somebody that was found unconscious next to a river, a complete auditory exam above all else.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. They're unconscious, but we got to check their hearing. The narration continues in this vein all the way up to 1969. More firsthand accounts, more journals or ledgers that have words like wavelengths and auditory structures. And the narrator drones on with oddly placed emphasis on random words for no discernible reason.
I'm picturing some little old lady in like a button-down gingham dress stationed at a desk whose only job is to collect various journals and notebooks as they come in, discreetly filing them away in a drawer marked, "All this to be forgotten."
I can see that. Yes. And then we have to tie back into Dr. Pause. Holloway.
Uh-huh.
She has a medical emergency, code for a mental break, and is hearing shit in the pipes on the evening of June 4th, 1963. Unsurprisingly, this is the day that she decided that she was going to go visit the site of Lawson Church. Quote, upon her release, she reportedly told colleagues that she could no longer continue her research because the waters remember and they've noticed my attention, end quote. So she literally has the Jumanji effect and retires to Arizona, no water there, and wrapped that little package up nice with a little crazy bow on top. Her notes were cataloged in 68, and another doctor picked up the torch and then quickly put it down again.
Yeah. And after 20 more minutes of repetitive monotone phrases of, quote, unusual occurrences and overly detailed descriptions that have already been overly described multiple times over, the narration ends with this cryptic warning, quote, you might hear something like distant singing, not quite human, not quite other, calling from beneath the surface. And if you do, remember the story of Reverend Thomas Lawson and his chapel before you allow your ears to linger too long on that resonant harmony. For some songs once heard continue to echo within the waters of your own being long after the external sound has ceased, and the boundary between listener and what is listened for may prove to be more permeable than you ever imagined, unquote.
So basically, the origins of what would later become known as an earworm, right? So, Cue Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille.
Yes. Oh, and with that, the video is over. Mercifully, painfully over. Oh.
And, you know, I listened to the last bit in the 20 minutes closely, and I'm pretty sure that the narrator repeated the exact same story about the swimmers disappearing twice. Almost the exact same words were used, but it changed the ending. And also,
Yes.
suddenly, the changes that it insists on iterating every damn time it brings up the merfolk are now taking place in 3 days, but they died. So the story annoys me to no end. It's just repetition.
Yeah. Okay, I need to ask the two of you, What the hell was this story about? I don't honestly know.
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I get that it's more or less about a church leader turning people into merfolk, and that's really about it. There's not a lot of narrative or anything. It's just a recording of information. Like if a reporter was at the beach in the movie Jaws and spent most of the time writing about the scientific makeup of the great white shark, and then just tangentially mentioning the moment it ate the kid on the floaty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in my view, it's proving that mermaids are real and come from Arkansas. And
Oh,
now,
okay.
granted, the esteemed Reverend Lawson did at least give credit to an older religion, except it isn't religion per se in this instance. It's mythos derived from ancient Syria and eventually the Greeks and Romans that expounded on it. The merfolk people.
Okay, okay. Well, but what was the purpose of transforming people into merfolk?
Yeah, I'm going with because I can is the viable answer.
Okay, all right. Well, do either of you have any, well, I can't exactly call them fan theories, but what would be your close to your, what, the hate-filled equivalent to a fan theory be?
For me, mine would have to be heavy metal poisoning in the water table, and psychedelic drugs for the good Dr. Holloway. That would at least explain the mass delusion in the 1870s and her role in this in the 1960s. I mean, flower power to the extreme, college lady.
I say there's an origin story for this reverend that's missing, like something in his past that initiated this. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say that there's a sexual element to it, because there usually is, involving an evening skinny dipping in a pond teeming with fish and a curious development that led to an overwhelming desire to create the perfect aquatic companion.
I love it.
Freud would love
I'll
you.
listen to that story.
All right. Well, we did it, guys. Another AI created documentary set afloat on a barge and set on fire. I want to thank the Fear Behind You YouTube channel for providing us the material for this review, and again proving that artificial intelligence is not ready to be implanted in our brains. I also want to give a shout out for my husband Cooney, who provides the editing and sound effects in these videos. Thanks, honey. And I want to thank Warren Reed for not listening to me when I told him at age 12, go away and don't talk to me. And I want to thank Nikki for continuing to join Warren and I in our quest to undermine our future AI overlords. Lastly, I want to encourage our listeners to like and subscribe, and most of all, leave a comment. Let us know of any videos that you find in this genre, and you'd like to hear us reduce, reuse, and recycle them. And with that, I hope all of you have a great day. In Jesus' name. Oh, Nikki?
Sorry.
Nikki. Okay. All right, we're going to start this again. And Warren, it's physiological structures.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Starting again. Edit.